afternoon, dear students. I am Danyanyukwa Amulungu, your tutor for English 1 for BESP. I would like you to welcome to today's lesson, and I wish you all to be hardworking, dedicated, and self-driven students in this course. Today's presentation is going to cover the subject content in short and a few general guidelines that I want everyone to keep in mind as we are approaching the August 2017 examination. I will discuss some of the content of the study guide, but not everything. This will help you in preparation of the exams that are coming up now in August. At this moment in time, I hope you have a clue on what the module is all about as you have completed the assignment, and I hope you do go through to prepare yourselves for the examination. Please note that I cannot give attention to the whole content because of time, so if you have any questions, you can always contact me at my email ndamulungu@gmail.com or on my cell phone number 081-3414-255. This presentation is going to highlight some important aspects that I need you to look at for the upcoming examination. In preparation of the exam, you can use the study guide for everything that you may need. In order for you to do well in the exam, I will need you to pay attention to the exit learning outcomes in the index of the study guide. They are provided at the beginning of every unit as well, and in order for you to answer the questions very well, you need to know how to answer the verbs. Sometimes you may be asked to discuss where you are expected to give a clear description of something, outline the positive and negative features, and arrive at a conclusion. But sometimes if you do not understand what the verb implies, you are bound to give a wrong answer. The same applies to when you are told to list. I know most of the time we just memorize, we don't really use our understanding, but when you are asked to list, you only name or mention. So the understanding of the verbs is really important. For exam questions, I really cannot give you the exam questions, so I will still really need you to just go through the module learning outcomes provided at the beginning of every unit. We'll move on to the first unit of our presentation, which is the forms and levels of language learning. And we'll start off with the domains or skills which the teaching of language comprises of. Most of these, or let me say all of them, can be found in the syllabus that you are going to use as you start with your teaching career. And these skills are reading, listening, speaking, and grammar. Now, all these 4 skills cannot be taught in isolation. You cannot teach one skill in a lesson. So you either integrate all 4 of them in one lesson, or at least use any 2, but not one. For example, if you are to teach learners on reading comprehension, for example, they are required to read, but you can as well come up with a discussion of the issue that was discussed in the reading passage at the end of the lesson. Or you can come up with a spelling test that you can give to learners at the end, just for writing purposes, or as they read through the reading comprehension also, that will be the skill of reading, of course, and with grammar, the words that they use in the spelling test, they can still use them for coming up with their own sentences in this case, they will also be able to demonstrate their understanding of the vocabulary presented to them. Okay? We move on, or we continue still to the forms of language skills, paying particular attention to the areas of language skills that learners usually acquire before they come to primary phase. Pragmatics. This is the study of language and the way it's used. In everyday life, we use language for different purposes. We like memorizing. That's one thing that I would discourage you to do. You need to be creative, come up with your own examples. Having to memorize the whole subject content will not make any sense, and it will not gain you any marks. So we use language for many different purposes. Let me say, for example, greetings. The module says good afternoon, but we have many different types of greetings that one can use depending on the time that they say it. For example, in the morning you can say good morning, in the afternoon, good afternoon, in the evening, good evening. Even the word goodbye or hi or hello are part of the greetings. We can also use language for information purposes. You can inform someone that, okay, my dear learners, tomorrow I will not be coming to school. Or you can inform the learners that tomorrow you should bring along your notebooks. You are still informing. You don't have to memorize the module content. You need to understand and be able to provide your own examples. The other purpose that language is used for is demanding. I want you to come over to my place. I want you to give me the book. Or give her book. You are demanding. You can also use language to promise someone something, or something like, I will give you a call later, or I will come over to your place for a chat, or please, my dear learners, I will expect you to study very hard because there is a test coming up. Okay? And another purpose that we can use language for is to request for something, to ask for something. Say, for example, please, Miss Shilongo, pass me your register. Or another example can be, please, my dear friend, may you please offer me $100. You are requesting, you're asking someone to give you something. Okay? We move on still with pragmatics. We can also use language, change language according to the needs of the listeners or the situation that you are presented with. For example, when you are talking to a learner, you talk differently than when you are talking to a principal. When you are talking to an adult or an elder, for example, you talk differently compared to talking to a friend. With a friend, you can be more casual, but with an adult, you have to say it with respect. For example, with a friend, you can say, hi dear, but with an adult, you have to put in respect and say, good afternoon, ma'am, or good afternoon, sir. Okay? You can also speak differently in a location than in church. Usually at church, we are more polite, we are more calm, but in a location, you can be yourself, you can express your own view, your own opinion. It doesn't matter, for as long as still you have to be considerate of other people's feelings, but the fact remains you cannot speak the same way at church the way you speak in a location. Moving on to following rules for conversation and storytelling. When you talk to a person, you cannot just be talking as if you are on a tape, you are recorded. No, you have to give chances to other people to talk. they have to air their views also. It's called a conversation, so you cannot have a conversation just on your own. You have to respect other people also when you are talking. When you give a speech at a funeral, also here you talk differently. This is not the time that one makes jokes. People are sad, so you have to follow the rules. You don't make jokes. People are already mourning. Now, if you have to crack jokes and things like that, the people that are already sad will be looking at you with wonder. The next one will also be clarifying when you are misunderstood. If a person doesn't understand, be polite and repeat what you have said, or use plain language so that a person will at least understand what you are trying to communicate to them. Standing close to someone when you are talking. Do not invade personal space. A person needs their personal space, whether they are communicating with you or whether they are not. So you have to respect that. You can also use facial expressions and eye contact. It's very important to maintain a conversation. Facial expressions, you can use you can frown if there's something that you are not happy about, or you can smile. Just sometimes it's needed so that a person knows that you are interested in what they are saying. You can also use verbal and non-verbal cues. Let me say, sometimes you are talking to a person that is a mute, and that means you need to use non-verbal expressions for the person to understand. You can also make a story interesting while narrating it, because when you talk to, let me say, a group of learners, they will get bored. So you have to follow the rules of storytelling so that the learners do not get bored. When the learners are bored, they are bound not to learn anything from the story, or will really not be able to answer any questions afterwards. Let's move on to semantics. This is the study of the meanings of words, expressions, and sentences, as well as with historical changes into those meanings. It includes the relationship between the signs, like words and symbols, and the mental and physical actions related to these meanings. For example, the connotative and denotative meanings of words fall under semantics. If a person says she has a heart, the heart in this case can either refer to the organ itself, or it can refer to someone who is emotional, or someone who is passionate, someone who is considerate, because the heart is looked at as the center of emotions. Can also give an example of a rose. Many male people like referring to their female counterparts as roses. A rose here can either be a flower itself or a beautiful person. So when a person calls you a rose, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are a flower, but it means you are a good person, you are a beautiful person. Okay? We'll move on to phonology. Phonology has to do with the sound systems of languages, the sound. And sound goes hand in hand with pronunciation of words. Okay? These words can be broken into smaller units known as segments or phonemes. With pronunciation, it doesn't have to be or to do anything with the meaning, but the sound that is made. For example, the word boy and toy. They can be broken up into smaller units. For example, the word b at the beginning of the word boy, or t at the beginning of the word toy, which infers meaning between a difference in meaning between the two words. boy, toy. B, boy, and T, toy. Phonology also has to do with the prosody, which is the pitch, the loudness, the tempo, and the rhythm. When a person is angry, you can tell that this person is loud, the pitch will be high, and the tempo might be also higher. Okay, we'll move on to morphology. Unlike phonology, morphology refers to the study of the form of the words. Okay, with the form of the words, the segments into which the words can be broken into should have meaning. For example, the word anti-government. When you break the word into segments, you cannot separate and then leave T, government. It has to be anti, which will have a meaning of against, govern, which means to rule, and ment, which is a noun suffix. The suffixes and affixes here should be taken into consideration. The suffix being part of the beginning of a sentence, and the suffix, the end of a sentence, the end of a word, and affix, the beginning of the word. For example, in that same word, anti-government, the word anti is an affix, and the word meant, which will make it a noun, is a suffix because it comes at the end of the word itself. But the main word itself is govern. Govern. Let's move on to syntax. This has to do with the way in which words are put together to either sound good or to have or convey a meaning. For example, if I am to mix up words in this sentence, is in the Ombili location the house? Of course, you understand what I'm saying, but it just sounds a little bit odd. The correct way to say it is, the house is in the Ombili location. Under syntax, we also have the importance of pronunciation. Look at that sentence. A woman without her man is nothing. This has a difference in meaning to a woman without her man is nothing. The first part implies that a woman that doesn't have a man is nothing. But the second part implies that the woman is important to a man, otherwise there will be nothing. I hope that makes sense. Let's move on to why should a teacher be proficient in English? Perhaps the first thing that I should highlight here is that we do not use American English in school. We use British English here in Namibia. I can perhaps give you a word or two that show the difference in the American and British English that we use. The word land and the word land. This is one and the same word, but the correct word to use in English here in Namibia in our lessons is land. This is American English, so it's wrong. The other word will be the word cot. The cot, which is the baby's bed, a baby's bed. In American English, it's a crib. So the word cot is correct, and the word crib is American English. So when you use it in a lesson, crib is the correct one. Okay? The reason why teachers should be proficient in English is, the first thing will be, we have the responsibility to teach learners the correct usage of the language. These learners that we are teaching are part of the people that are going to become teachers in future. They are part of the people that will travel abroad. So they have to have the knowledge of the usage of the correct English. Being proficient doesn't have anything to do with how fast you can speak, but being able to speak with proper pronunciation, correct grammar, intonation, and comprehension. By this I mean, let me say, for example, the word hyperactive. Hyperactive. If I am to pronounce it and say hyperactive, it will not sound right. The pronunciation is wrong. So it's very important to be able to pronounce the words they are supposed to. The dictionary has the correct pronunciation, and nowadays we have internet, we have applications that we can use to check the spelling, the pronunciation, as well as the phonetic meanings of words. Look at the example in the notes. I have a book. Most of us make the mistake of saying I am having, but the word have does not carry ing. It is only have and will always only be have. I'm not having a book. It's wrong. I do not have a book. That is the correct way to say it. The other reason why a teacher should be proficient in English is the learners look up to you. They see you as a role model. That's why most of the time you find that learners like imitating what their teachers like doing or what they like saying. So it's very important for you to model the correct English for the learners so that they don't repeat the same mistake that you once did. Practice makes perfect. So the only way that you can be not only fluent but speaking with correct pronunciation and intonation is through practice. Let's move on to the communicative language approach. The communicative language approach makes use of real-life situations that necessitate communication. In this case, or in this approach, a teacher presents the learners with a situation that they are more likely to encounter. Let me say, for example, in a language lesson, you can come up with a topic such as, if you are presented or if you find yourself in an argument, what would you do? Of course, the learners' responses will vary. Some will give the same answers, but most of the answers may vary. So this will leave the learners in suspense as to the outcome of the lesson. It all depends on their reactions and the responses. There is no single correct answer. But if they are presented with a situation in which they can imagine themselves in, they are more likely to be active, they talk more, and the teacher can only be there, stand back, and facilitate the learning. Most of the learners open up if they are more comfortable. If you give them a topic or a situation that they are more comfortable with, they are more likely to participate. So it's encouraged very much if teachers can give topics to learners that are linked to real life situations. The last bullet here says, students' motivation to learn comes from their desire to communicate in meaningful ways about meaningful topics. I will highlight the word meaningful topics. I know most of the time we give any topic that comes to mind, But if you give a meaningful topic, the learners are bound to participate and are motivated to say something. Let's move on to the syllabus aims. The syllabus aims, the first one is to support creativity and intellectual development. Learners become more creative or use their imagination if you do that also integrate it in a lesson. When you come up with a topic in a lesson, you must not encourage memorization. You must encourage learners to be creative and be able to come up with solutions of their own, answers of their own, and not merely to memorize. One of the aims, again, is to help learners develop self-confidence and better understanding of the world in which they live. As a teacher, in your lessons, you must be able to provoke or invoke the feelings of participation. If not, then the learners will not have any confidence in responding to your questions or taking part in the lesson. So what you need to do to achieve this aim, you have to come up with an interesting lesson. An interesting lesson in which the learners can be free, have self-confidence, and stand up and say, Miss or Sir, it's my turn, and I want to say this to answer your question. It's also another aim is also to develop positive attitudes, values, and understanding of local, social, and cultural issues. The good thing about this point is being able to prove it and being able to just make an example of it in any lesson. Our lessons, in most of our lessons, we have learners from different cultures, cultural backgrounds, of different races, of different ages, of different social backgrounds. So this one will become easy because the learners already are mixed, which is a very good thing because they get to learn from one another. They get to know others' personalities, their other learners' cultures, which is a very good thing. So in order for you to develop positive attitudes towards all these things, you have to make it part of your lessons. The next bullet is to develop awareness of health and population issues, democracy and human rights, information and technology, HIV and AIDS, the environment, and individual responsibilities regarding these. Most of the time when I encourage students to come up with their lesson plans, I normally ask them to use the above mentioned as their themes. Let me say the topic of HIV and AIDS. You can use HIV and AIDS as a theme of your lesson and perhaps narrow it down in the topic. Let me say, for example, the causes of HIV and AIDS or the symptoms of HIV and AIDS as your topic of your lesson plan, of your lesson, sorry. Another aim is to enable learners to communicate effectively in speech and writing in their second language. In order for a lesson to be successful, especially when it comes to communication, which may be either in writing or in speaking, which is one of the reading the skills, you have to integrate it in a lesson, and learners should be given a chance to just write something or say something, come up with a meaningful topic that they can easily contribute to. Remember, these are upper primary learners, so you have to try by all means so that they gather something from these lessons, make the lesson interesting, invoke interest in them so that they participate. The last one will be to develop proficiency in the medium of instruction, which is English in the upper primary phase. As discussed earlier, I said the teacher should model appropriate English so that the learners will look up to you. If you make mistakes, the same mistakes will be done by the learners because they look up to you as their role model. Let's move on to the next slide, which is interpersonal communication. We often not misinterpret or misunderstand the word interpersonal communication. Interpersonal has to do with communication or interaction between two people or more. But we do confuse it with the word intrapersonal communication, which is communication within oneself. Okay? With interpersonal communication, this entails the interaction between two or more people. It can be through verbal and non-verbal communication, as well as physical communication. A person may communicate through hand signals, for example, or if I frown, you'll know that I'm angry. I'm communicating to you that I'm angry. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. We'll move on to the next slide, which is on the stages of planning a lesson. Through marking of assignments, I've realized that we don't really understand the components of or the stages of planning a lesson. So I'll go through with you in brief, starting with revision. The revision part or homework done has to do with something that was part of the lesson that was discussed the previous day or in the previous lesson. The next bullet is presentation. In this stage, you introduce the new item to pupils, the new content to pupils. It must be very interesting. If learners are not interested in your lesson, of course they are not going to take part. They are bound to make noise or disrespect you or do anything apart from concentrating on the lesson. So under the presentation is where you group learners into groups or in pairs or individual, depending on the type of work that you are going to give them. Practice. In the practice stage, here you give the learners a controlled activity. You control the activity yourself as a teacher. In this stage, the practice stage, you must integrate the four skills, which are reading, writing, speaking, as well as grammar. Like the examples I gave you earlier of giving a reading passage to the learners, of course that is reading. They answer comprehension questions, that is writing, and perhaps you can have a discussion after that in which the learners are expected to contribute orally, as well as grammar, which you can assess through taking out some vocabulary and then giving a dictation or a spelling test, or you let them write their own sentences in which they use the words that you have taken out from the reading passage. The next bullet or the next stage is production. Here you give learners an activity which they can do by themselves. Most of the time this is done through homework, which they do at home on their own without your supervision, and they only bring it the next day. And it can either be still a written activity or a reading activity or something that they have to report back to you in the next lesson. In the roundup stage, Here you can finish the lesson by giving a roundup of the day's work. Here you can consolidate, you can put emphasis on the basic competencies of the lessons in order for you to be able to reflect on the lesson and get to know whether the learners have really achieved or met the basic competency for the day or for the lesson. In the roundup also, here that's where you notice or realize that some learners may have or may have not achieved the basic competencies, and they will have to sit for support, learner support, which in primary phase usually happens after school. You take the learners with a few weaknesses and do something after school to help them. If it's reading, then you sit with them and help them with the reading. Writing, you give them something to write, and then you can help them with whatever it is that they did not achieve. Moving on to the importance of stories in children's lives. The first thing that perhaps I should highlight here is stories help with the mastery of language. Stories are very interesting. Now, if you as a teacher, or maybe the learners themselves are telling a story and it's interesting and you are using correct language, they are bound to learn the correct language from you or from their classmates. Stories also help children learn about life outside their own world. Through their stories like the Cinderella stories, they can imagine themselves being Cinderella. Or if it's a story, for example, about children from a different culture, let me say if learners are Tswana and they are perhaps, sorry, not the learners, but the story is about Tswanas. The story perhaps is all about how a certain girl has grown up being taught the values and norms in their culture. Now, if the learners are to hear this story, they will obviously learn about other people's cultures and have respect about other people's cultures as well, knowing that we are in a world with different people from diverse cultures and traditions. The stories stimulate the learner's imagination and take them into a rich new world where everything is possible. Learners are presented with situations, perhaps sometimes difficult situations, and if they happen to hear a story about a certain character that was going through certain problems, they are able to use their imagination and think about that specific learner and think about that specific character, and be able to imagine themselves in that situation. The child or the learner can also become involved with the sentence, and this emotional involvement in stories is what we catch on. As you read a story to them or you tell a story to the learners, when the character is frightened, the learners are also bound to be frightened. When the character is happy, they are also bound to be happy. And so it is. The stories are also a powerful medium to introduce children to other cultures. Through learning stories or listening to stories on other cultures, the learners are able to relate to and realize that people are from different cultures and are diverse. The last part of the presentation will touch on the informal and formal assessment. The informal assessment referring to the type of assessment which is not recorded for marks, for CAS mark, which is continuous assessment mark, This can mostly be done through listening. You can observe the learner's talking informally. You can give them a topic just to familiarize themselves, for example, with other students, just discussing, asking each other questions on any personal thing, or you can make it formal and give them anything for as long as you give them something to talk about. It's all okay. You can also have one-on-one discussions with the learners, just asking a few questions, and you can also record this just so that the learners can reflect back and see how they performed. The formal assessment, this is the examination situation, but it also includes the CAS mark. Remember, the CAS mark is also part of the examination results that come towards the end of the term. You give CAS activities to the learners that are supposed to be recorded, and these ones are usually supervised, because if you give them as homework, sometimes they may copy or get help from somewhere else. Listening in the upper primary is usually done informally, but as learners proceed to the senior secondary phase or the junior secondary phase, the listening is assessed on a formal basis. What you should do in the exam room is you read the instructions carefully, make sure you understand the instruction and the questions carefully in order for you not to give the wrong answer or answer too little or too much than is expected. Always use practical examples when necessary to strengthen your answer. I've already discouraged you from memorizing the summaries from the module, so it's better for you to come up with your own practical examples. Provide enough answers. Don't write too little, don't write too much. If it's too little, your marks will not be enough. If it's too much, then it's also taking up some time. Check the marks that are allocated at the end of each question or part question to ensure that you have given enough for the question. In conclusion, I would like to say that you must not memorize everything. Try to understand the content of the subject instead of memorizing everything, because in the end, if a question is to be asked in a different manner, you will not be able to give the correct answer. Read the instructions carefully. Your answers must be complete, and please write as neatly as you can in order to make it easier for the tutor to mark and make out what you have written. Good luck with your exams, dear students.